Welcome to Hidden Romantic Tales. Please don't forget to subscribe. The evening began like any other. Sarah had set the table carefully, the candles glowing softly against the cream walls of her dining room. Her husband, Daniel, was expecting an old friend from college. She had heard his name many times before, Michael, but had never truly met him until tonight. She tried to convince herself it was just another dinner. Yet, for some reason, her heart felt restless, as if the night carried something unusual in its silence. When the doorbell rang, Daniel greeted his friend with laughter and a strong embrace. Michael was taller than she imagined, his smile warm but his eyes carrying a shadow of something unspoken. Sarah noticed it instantly. He wasn't the loud, confident man Daniel had described. Instead, he seemed thoughtful, almost guarded. They all sat together, the three of them exchanging polite words, but Sarah could not ignore the way Michael's gaze lingered a second too long when she spoke. Not in an impolite way, but in a way that suggested he was listening differently, more deeply than others usually did. When dinner ended, Daniel excused himself to take a call in his study. That was when it happened. Michael shifted his chair closer and sat next to Sarah. She looked at him, surprised. "You can sit there," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I hope I'm not intruding," he replied, his tone low, almost hesitant. "It just feels easier to talk this way." His words unsettled her, yet she didn't move away. The closeness was strange but not unwelcome. They began talking, at first about harmless things, like books and music. But then his voice grew more serious. "Daniel has told me so much about you," Michael said, his eyes searching hers. "But what he doesn't know is that I already noticed you years ago, back when he and I were in college. I never said a word because you were his. But tonight, sitting here, I feel like fate is testing me." Sarah's breath caught. She wasn't prepared for such honesty. Her pulse quickened, and she didn't know whether to feel flattered or alarmed. "Michael," she whispered, "you shouldn't say things like that." "I know," he admitted, his hands tightening around his glass. "But sometimes silence weighs heavier than words. Do you ever feel that way?" Her heart ached at his question. She thought of the quiet distance that had grown between her and Daniel over the years. He loved her, she knew, but his long hours at work often left her lonely, her emotions buried beneath daily routines. And here was Michael, looking at her as if he could see every hidden thought she carried. She tried to steady herself. "I think we all carry things we don't speak of." He leaned in, his voice barely audible. "Then maybe tonight is the night to speak them." Before Sarah could respond, Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hallway. She froze, the air thick with unspoken words. Michael straightened quickly, his expression composed, as though nothing had happened. Daniel re-entered the room with his usual cheer, unaware of the storm that had quietly begun at his own table. Sarah forced a smile, but inside her chest, her heart raced wildly, as though she had just crossed a line she could never return from, and in that moment, she knew everything had already changed. Sarah tried to focus on Daniel's cheerful chatter, but her thoughts were tangled. The way Michael had looked at her lingered in her mind, as if his gaze had carved itself into her memory. She wondered if Daniel had noticed anything at all. He seemed so carefree, pouring another glass of wine, laughing at a story only he found amusing. Michael sat quietly, nodding along, but his silence said more than words ever could. Sarah felt it. Every second he remained beside her made her both restless and strangely alive. When the evening came to a close, Michael thanked them both for dinner. Daniel walked him to the door, clapping him on the back like a brother. Sarah stood a step behind, her hands clasped tightly together. Just as Michael turned to leave, his eyes met hers. It was only a moment, but it carried 1,000 unspoken things. No smile, no words, just that look, deep and steady before he disappeared. Into the night, Sarah could hardly sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Daniel slept soundly beside her. She kept replaying Michael's voice in her mind. Maybe tonight is the night to speak them. The next morning, Daniel was rushing to work as usual. "I'll be late tonight," he said, kissing her quickly before leaving. His brief touch felt automatic, distant, like a routine performed without thought. Hours passed, but Sarah's thoughts remained unsettled. She busied herself with housework, yet her hands trembled whenever she remembered the closeness at the table. It wasn't supposed to matter. Michael was just Daniel's friend. But why did it feel like something inside her had been awakened? By late afternoon, she heard the knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. When she opened it, Michael stood there, unexpected, unannounced. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, noticing her surprise. "I shouldn't have come without calling, but I couldn't leave last night the way I did. I need to say what I couldn't say then." Sarah's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to leave, that this was wrong, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, she stepped aside and let him in. They sat across from each other in the quiet living room. The ticking of the clock sounded louder than ever. Michael's eyes were heavy with emotion. "Sarah, I've carried this for years. When I saw you yesterday, it all came back stronger than ever. I know Daniel is my friend. I know what I'm saying is dangerous, but I can't pretend anymore. Being near you feels like something I've been waiting for all my life." Her hands trembled against her lap. "Michael, you can't say this to me. I'm married." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But do you feel nothing? Not even the loneliness I saw in your eyes last night?" His words struck her where she was most fragile. She thought of the many evenings she had eaten dinner alone, waiting for Daniel to return from endless meetings. The countless times she had dressed up hoping he would notice, only to be met with tired eyes and hurried kisses. Tears pricked her eyes. "It's not that simple," she whispered. Michael leaned closer, his voice trembling. "Maybe it is. Maybe the simple truth is that two people can't always choose where their hearts lead them." Sarah's breath shook as silence filled the room. Her heart screamed with confusion, caught between loyalty and a yearning she had buried for far too long. And then, it happened. Michael reached out and took her hand in his, holding it firmly as if it belonged there. His touch was warm, steady, undeniable. Sarah froze, her pulse racing so wildly she thought it might give her away. She wanted to pull away, but she didn't. In that moment, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through the air. Daniel was home early. Sarah's heart dropped as she quickly pulled her hand back from Michael's. The warmth of his touch lingered, but fear overtook her. Michael sat up straighter, his expression shifting instantly, as though he had never moved closer to her at all. The sound of the front door unlocking filled the room. Sarah rose to her feet, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Daniel stepped in, his briefcase slung over his shoulder. "Sarah? Michael?" He stopped mid-step, surprised. "What's going on here?" Sarah's voice stumbled. "Oh, Michael was just passing by. He came in to say hello." Michael nodded quickly. "I was near the area, thought I'd drop in. I hope it's not inconvenient." Daniel's suspicion seemed to fade as fast as it appeared. He laughed, setting his briefcase down. "Inconvenient? Of course not. I should have expected this. You two always find something to talk about." The words cut through Sarah, though Daniel meant them innocently. She forced a smile, but her heart was racing. Michael stood his composure intact. "I should get going. I didn't mean to interrupt your evening." Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't be ridiculous. Stay for dinner." But Michael's eyes flickered to Sarah's, silent and heavy. She could read his answer there, before he even spoke. "Another time," he said quietly. "I'll see you both soon." When he left, Sarah exhaled shakily as if she had been holding her breath for too long. That night, Daniel was unusually affectionate, perhaps out of guilt for always working late. He asked about her day, listened more than usual, even held her hand as they sat on the couch. Yet Sarah's heart was elsewhere. She kept hearing Michael's voice. Maybe the simple truth is that two people can't always choose where their hearts lead them. Days passed, but the tension inside her only grew. She told herself she wouldn't see Michael again, that it had to end before it even began. But fate had other plans. A week later, Daniel mentioned casually over breakfast, "Michael's been helping me with some business matters. I invited him over this weekend. Thought we could all catch up again." Sarah's spoon froze midair. "This weekend?" "Yes," Daniel said cheerfully. "Don't go overboard with preparations, though. He's practically family." Those words echoed in her mind. Practically family. She wondered what Daniel would think if he knew how close family had come to crossing a line. Saturday evening arrived, and Sarah found herself more nervous than she had been in years. She chose a simple dress, not wanting to draw attention, yet she couldn't stop her hands from shaking as she set the table. When Michael arrived, his eyes met hers for the first time since that afternoon. Something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement of the secret they shared, of the moment they had nearly been caught. Dinner went smoothly at first. Daniel filled the room with laughter, recalling old college memories. Sarah tried to play the role of the perfect hostess, but each time her eyes drifted to Michael, her chest tightened. It was after dessert, when Daniel excused himself to take another phone call, that the tension grew unbearable. Once again, Michael and Sarah were left alone. Michael leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "I shouldn't be here. Every moment I spend in this house makes it harder for me to walk away." Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to say it was wrong, that they should stop, but her heart betrayed her with its wild rhythm. Michael's eyes searched hers. "Tell me to leave, Sarah. Tell me now, and I swear I'll disappear from your life." Her throat tightened. She tried to speak, but the truth pressed against her like a rising tide. She didn't want him to go. Before she could answer, Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hallway once again. Michael sat back instantly, his expression calm, but Sarah's hands trembled under the table. Daniel returned, smiling, unaware of the fire burning silently between the two people sitting across from him. And Sarah realized with dread. This secret was only growing heavier, and it would not stay hidden forever. For the rest of the evening, she barely spoke, afraid her voice would betray the storm inside her. Daniel didn't notice. He was too busy telling stories, his laughter filling the room. Michael, however, noticed everything. His quiet glances toward her, the way his jaw tightened when she looked away. Each small gesture made Sarah feel as though they were having a silent conversation no one else could hear. When Michael finally left, Daniel kissed her forehead goodnight, before heading straight to bed, exhausted from his day. But Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, staring at the moonlit street, and her heart whispered truths she wasn't ready to face. The next morning, Daniel rushed off to another meeting, leaving Sarah alone once again. She thought she would finally have peace, but as the hours passed, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Michael. "I can't pretend anymore. Meet me, just once. If you say no, I'll never bother you again." Sarah's hand shook as she read the words. She knew what agreeing would mean, the line she would be crossing. Yet the loneliness of her marriage pressed against her heart, and Michael's message felt like a door she had secretly longed to open. By afternoon, she found herself at a small cafe on the quieter side of town. When she walked in, Michael was already there, waiting. His face softened when he saw her, as if her very presence had eased something in him. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have," Sarah replied, sitting across from him. Her voice trembled, but she didn't move to leave. They talked for hours, not about Daniel, not about guilt, but about themselves. Their dreams, their disappointments, the pieces of their lives they had never shared with anyone else. With each word, Sarah felt more alive than she had in years. At one point, Michael leaned closer, his voice low and unsteady. "Do you realize what's happening to us? I've tried to fight it, Sarah, but when I look at you, I feel like I've finally found what I was missing all along." Her heart ached with equal parts fear and longing. "And what if what you're missing is something you're not meant to have?" Michael's eyes darkened. "Then I'll live with the pain. But at least I'll know I told you the truth." The cafe grew louder around them, But inside their corner, time seemed to stop. Sarah could feel her defenses breaking one by one. She wanted to deny him, to protect herself from the danger of this bond, but her heart betrayed her with its quiet confession. When the evening sun dipped low, Michael reached across the table and gently touched her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. "Sarah," he whispered, "tell me you feel it too." Her lips parted, her chest rising with the weight of the truth she had kept buried. She wanted to say no, to end it here, but the words that slipped out were softer, more dangerous. "I do." Michael's breath caught. For a moment, he closed his eyes, as if those two words were both a blessing and a curse. They sat in silence, hands entwined across the table, knowing their lives had just crossed into dangerous territory. When Sarah returned home that night, Daniel was waiting, his tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face. "You were gone a long time," he said casually. "Everything okay?" Sarah forced a smile, her heart thundering inside her chest. "Yes," she replied. "Everything's fine." But as she looked at her husband, the man who had once been her whole world, she realized nothing was fine, because part of her belonged somewhere else now, and she didn't know how long she could keep it hidden. The following days were a blur of ordinary routines, meals cooked, floors cleaned, Daniel's rushed goodbyes and late-night returns. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside Sarah, everything was different. She carried Michael's words like a secret flame, burning quietly in the shadows of her marriage. Each time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt, terrified it might be him, and yet secretly hoping it. Was one evening, as Sarah set the table, Daniel walked into the kitchen with a weary smile. "You've been quieter lately," he said, sliding his arms loosely around her waist. "Is everything okay?" She froze at his touch, guilt pressing against her ribs. "I'm fine," she answered quickly, too quickly. Daniel frowned. Sure. You seem distant." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him, to confess the ache of loneliness that had built over years, the emptiness that had left her vulnerable to Michael's warmth. But how could she? The truth would break him. "I'm just tired," she whispered, kissing his cheek. Daniel accepted her answer, but suspicion lingered in his eyes. That night, when he finally fell asleep, Sarah lay awake again, staring into the darkness. She felt trapped between two lives, the one she had built with Daniel and the one her heart longed for with Michael. The next afternoon, she met Michael again. This time, they didn't go to the cafe. He had asked her to walk with him in the Eiteig park, where the trees offered shade and secrecy. "You look worried," Michael said gently as they strolled side by side. "I am," Sarah admitted. "Daniel notices things. If he ever suspects—" Her voice trailed off. Michael stopped walking and turned to her. His hand brushed against hers, careful but deliberate. "I don't want to hurt him. I never wanted this to happen. But Sarah, I can't go back to pretending. I love you, and I think you love me too." Her breath hitched. She wanted to deny it, but her silence gave her away. The truth sat heavy between them. "Michael," she whispered, "even if I feel it." "What future could we possibly have? He's your friend. He's my husband." Michael's voice broke. Sometimes the heart doesn't care about titles. It only cares about where it feels alive. She closed her eyes, tears threatening to fall. For years she had longed for someone to see her. Not just the perfect wife, not just the quiet shadow of Daniel's busy life, but her. Michael saw her, and that terrified her more than anything. As they turned a corner, Sarah spotted a familiar car parked across the street. Her blood ran cold, Daniel's car. She stopped in her tracks, her pulse racing. "Michael," she whispered urgently, "we have to go. Now." Confused, he followed her gaze, and his face paled. They hurried apart, pretending to be strangers, but Sarah's chest was tight with panic. What if Daniel had seen them? What if he had followed her? She rushed home, her thoughts spinning wildly. When she entered the house, Daniel was already there, sitting in the living room, His tie was loosened, his expression unreadable. "You were out," he said simply. Sarah's heart pounded. "Yes. I went for a walk." Daniel studied her carefully, his eyes sharp in a way that made her stomach twist. "With someone?" Her lips trembled. "No, I was alone." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Daniel leaned back, his gaze never leaving her face. "Sarah," he said quietly, "don't lie to me." Her knees weakened, her secret pressing against her chest like a weight she could no longer carry. And in that moment, she realized Daniel already knew something was wrong. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the chair. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. But he raised his hand to stop her. His eyes, usually warm and gentle, now held an edge of pain. "You don't have to explain. I can see it in your face. The distance, the way you've been drifting away from me." His voice cracked, heavy with hurt. "Is it Michael?" Her breath caught. The name spoken aloud felt like a knife twisting in her chest. She wanted to deny it, to protect herself from the truth, but her silence betrayed her. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling deeply as if trying to steady himself. "He's been my friend for half my life, Sarah. And you're my wife. Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Tears streamed down her face. "I never wanted this," she cried. "I tried to fight it. But Daniel, I've been so lonely. You're always gone, always somewhere else. And when Michael looked at me, it felt like he saw me in a way I hadn't been seen in years." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes wet but fierce. "So you turned to him?" "I didn't plan it," she said desperately. "It just happened." The room fell silent, the weight of her confession heavy between them. Daniel paced across the room, running a hand through his hair, torn between anger and sorrow. Finally, he stopped and looked at her. "Do you love him?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. Sarah's lips parted, trembling, as the truth rose unbidden. She thought of Michael's eyes, his voice, the way her heart came alive in his presence. "I don't know," she whispered. "But I can't deny what I feel." Daniel staggered back as if the air itself had struck him. He turned away, gripping the back of the chair, his shoulders shaking. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The sharp sound sliced through the silence. Sarah's heart froze. Daniel wiped his face quickly, his voice low and strained. "Open it." She walked to the door with unsteady steps. When she pulled it open, Michael stood there, his eyes filled with the same conflict that haunted hers. Daniel's voice came from behind her, tight with emotion. "Of course, it's him." Michael's face paled as he stepped inside. "Daniel, Don't," Daniel snapped, his pain spilling over. "Don't insult me with apologies. You, both of you, took something sacred and broke it." His voice faltered, but he straightened, forcing calm. "I don't even know who I'm more betrayed by, my friend or my wife." Sarah's sobs shook her as she tried to reach for him. "Daniel, please." But he stepped back, his eyes hard. "I need time. I can't look at either of you right now." With that, he grabbed his keys and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sarah collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Michael stood frozen, guilt etched deep into every line of his face. "This is my fault," he whispered hoarsely. "I should have stayed away." Sarah looked up at him through her tears, her voice breaking. "It's not that simple. We can't undo what's already been spoken or felt." Michael sank into the seat across from her, his eyes heavy with regret. "Then what happens now?" She shook her head, the answer lost somewhere between hope and despair. "I don't know." Outside, the night stretched on endlessly, carrying with it the weight of broken vows, forbidden love, and choices that could never be undone. And as Sarah sat there, caught between the man she had promised to love and the one her heart couldn't resist, she realized her life would never return to what it once was. Because some lines, once crossed, could never be redrawn. The end.